Hi, I'm Wei-Chung and I am an economist by training, but business practitioner by heart.
And I am India Tucker, a designer by trade with a knack for marketing and an entrepreneurial spirit. And this is Crash and Build, the podcast where we talk about crashing old perceptions and building new perspectives in the realms of business, economics, marketing, tech, and more.
Here we introduce you to aha moments that will prompt new ideas. Listen in to stay on pace with our ever-changing world. Hey, I'm so excited today. We're doing this pilot episode for this newly created podcast. We call it Crash and Build. My name is Wei-Chung and I'm here with my friend and dear colleague, India Tucker. And I am so excited to be here, India. What do you think?
I'm excited too, Wei-Chung. It's been a long time coming, but here we are, finally recording the first episode.
Yeah, I mean, we called it Crash and Build, and we were really proud of the name because we wanted to really make sure that we deliver valuable information to our audience. And you want to talk a little bit about why we call it Crash and Build?
Yeah, I think when we were coming up with the name, you said we were talking about businesses because businesses go through cycles where things may not go so well, and then things start to go better. And you were like, crash and burn. That's what they do. They crash and burn, but then they build up again. And then I said, okay, crash and build. I think that works perfectly. And I mean, it fits into what we're going to be talking a lot about on the podcast. So
yeah, especially today, right? Because when we talk about especially the entrepreneurial spirit that we see, particularly in the technology industry, people focus on building a lot. And what they generally overlook is that with building, it's because of something didn't work, something crashed. So we need to build. And I understand that all the efforts are pretty much incremental, but as we keep pushing the initiative forward, we are oftentimes building on other people's fiascos or failures. And so this crash and build idea, like when we first came across this name, and we're like, oh, you know what? This may be it. Like we wanted to make sure that people understand that there are always two sides of the same coin, right? And I think it'll be helpful for the listeners to understand where we're coming from. So I have been in the technology industry, actually the multitudes of industry, and from, especially with this podcast, I come from a perspective of being someone that is currently in charge of the marketing function in a technology company that I built, over a decade ago. And I've certainly seen a lot of ups and downs in business, and particularly in the field that I have been in. And I know India, obviously I'm more seasoned, and that's a better way to say that I'm old. And in India, you're younger, you're newer, and we wanted to see how our ideas could clash and maybe provide some valuable information and insight to our listeners.
Yeah, I wouldn't say old. I would just say wise, Wei-Chung. You're just more wise than I.
Hopefully that's the case. I don't know, right? Yeah, and thanks to technology, like we're recording this episode from two different time zones. I'm on the West Coast and you're in the East Coast. And the landscape that we're in our industry is completely different, right? I mean, you visited West Coast, and I lived in the East Coast for like 12, 13 years. So, I know the differences in the different landscapes. And so, yeah. And I wanted to kind of provide a segue into what we really want to talk about in this pilot episode, which is why I mentioned the West Coast, because everybody now knows that West Coast, particularly the Silicon Valley, is kind of like the birthplace of modern technology industry. Or even if we don't talk about like modern technology industry, it certainly is the cradle of all these technology giants that we're talking about on a daily basis. How do you feel about the differences between the different landscapes?
I mean, like, I grew up in Pennsylvania in a small town, and I didn't go to California until last year was my first time in California. And I got to see all different areas, but I definitely got to visit Silicon Valley, San Diego, but mainly Silicon Valley. And I mean, it's exactly kind of what you imagine being from the East Coast, like all of these people that you see them on the street and you wouldn't think that they're rich or or that they are maybe the founder of like a tech giant, and they're wearing sandals and a t-shirt, but then you talk to them and they're like, oh, I founded this company. So
Right.
I mean, it's interesting. Silicon Valley, it's condensed. It's everywhere you go, people work in tech, which is very
Right.
different from over here, even from like in New York. It's completely different than people in New York too. So
I would agree, right? I mean, I've been to all major cities in the United States, and Silicon Valley particularly. Like, not to say that there aren't hustlers in other big cities, but everybody's a hustler, right? Everybody's hustling for something. But I think in Silicon Valley in particular, even if you're not working in the technology industry, you possess the kind of entrepreneurial spirit that you want to build something. Because the culture, right? The culture, like it's like you're immersing yourself in a culture where everybody is onto something. Everybody is building something new. And they like random people, and this is from my personal experience, like random people that you bump in the street will take the cues and share with you their crazy ideas that they are, maybe cultivating. And that is something that you wouldn't be able to find in Chicago or New York City or Boston, right? It's just the culture is very different, but everybody's still hustling.
true.
And I think that affects how we random average people in the street view technology industry. It's almost now a requirement that if you want to be in a technology industry, you gotta really try to be that hustler, that entrepreneur, and have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit to push something to happen and break through, which is kind of different from like if you were just an entrepreneur in other areas, right? And I think if you talk, with enough people in the technology industry in particular, they always have this sense of urgency. Like if I don't do the thing that I want to do today, it'll be too late. Somebody else is gonna hijack that idea and run with it, and then I'm gonna miss the train, right? So the FOMO, the fear of missing out mentality, is in particular so apparent and obvious, and sometimes it's tiring. It's exhausting, right? And take it from a person that has been in the technology field for a long time. And I got to sit from a different perspective because I also have been involved in other industries. So I get to always compare notes. And to a point that in my mid 40s, I could easily tell that, if somebody tries to talk to me, I could kind of tell that, if this person is from the technology industry or not.
Right. You are more well versed, and you have a lot of experience in that area, I think.
Good, bad, different, right? I mean, it's just who I am.
Right.
Right, good, bad, ugly. So when we talk about crash and build, I think like people ignore the ugly side of crash. If you kind of review the technological advancement in human history, modern technology invention wasn't, obvious to us until the first industrial revolution. And may I remind you, prior to that, it was 90,000 years of hunting and gathering, right? And then, 10,000 years of agricultural period. And then modern technology innovation, like the one that took place in the first industrial revolution, it wasn't too long ago that we had that. It was like 200-300 years ago. And it obviously crashed a lot of things, revolutionized how people view the society. And then right now we're talking about, if it was the boom in the technology industry causing the income disparity, finally we're at the point where we're trying to apply a little bit more humanistic thought in what we're doing as part of the casualty, if you will. So how do we make sense of what we're doing and what we're seeing and how we're feeling? Right.
And yeah, I think that's kind of like the topic that we want to touch on today, is that especially now with AI, technology has been just increasing at an ever rapid pace. And, most of the time when there's a new form of technology that comes out, we need to, or the inventors of that technology they have to kind of overview what are the consequences of this? What could go wrong when we put this out, when we throw this out into society? What could go wrong? How is this going to affect overall society, the population? How is it going to affect human life? And sometimes when things move so fast, we don't even look into it. We just keep going. And like you said, especially if you live in Silicon Valley or if you work in tech, you are immediately thinking, how can I implement AI into my company or into my software? So that's kind of what we want to touch on today, is how this new technology can be used for the better, but we also want to look at what might be the side effects of AI and tech in general. I don't know.
Yeah, right. I mean, so you're absolutely right. I will tell you that before the proliferation of personal computers, nobody thought about, how about those people that don't possess the ability to learn new technology? What happened when they lose jobs, right? Or when there was the introduction of the ATM machines in the 70s, we knew that the introduction was going to wipe out a lot of jobs. In the banking industry, all the bank tellers will probably lose their jobs. Yes, we know. I mean, from the economic development perspective, we know that those people, some of them will probably retrain and retool themselves to take on like jobs that provide like higher added value. But it's a painful period that they would have to suffer, right? And nobody talked about that. And I could extrapolate by saying that it's not only the technological advancement that caused the short-term suffering. I mean, the institutional change, like international trade, for example, takes away so many different jobs. It's just the pace of change happens to be that much faster in the technology industry. And so sometimes it's overnight, or, I say overnight, I may be exaggerating. I'm talking about like maybe a year or two. Like currently we talk about AI, maybe in a year or two, like artificial intelligence is going to wipe out certain industries, right? And in India, you've been in the creative line of work, and you know how many tools that exist today that help you with the creative endeavors.
Yeah.
And we don't think about the implications or ramifications of those things. And quite honestly, people don't care about that. And I don't know whether you share similar experiences, India, that if you talk to like the founders or entrepreneurs that have the latest technology ideas in Silicon Valley, they will only share with you the positives. Of course, because from their perspective, they see the benefit of the technology that they want to invent, or the idea that they possess, and how that's going to change, from their perspective, the society for the better. And they're going to push for it. And the way that they validate that approach is how much resources that they could garner to support their ideas. So really, their economic incentives lie within how much money that they could raise, or whether or not they could immediately have a revenue position to scale up as quick as possible. They are not interested in experimenting the impact to the society, right? Unless that there is an external shock that like COVID, for example, that pushed everybody to go virtual, which pretty much helped cultivate the internet conferencing software space, right? And then we're not going to have the time. I mean, so from my perspective, I think everybody in the technology industry is pushing something as quick as possible forward because it's not built in their incentive system to really take in consideration, what might happen or what might go wrong.
So I know, when we hear a lot about AI right now, we kind of hear there's two opinions. There's the one opinion that is all for it, like AI can help us do so much. It's going to make our workflow more efficient. It's going to do this. And then there are people who are completely against it. So maybe we should start by talking a little bit about like the two sides. And I know a little bit about your opinion. I know your opinion because I know you, but would you like to share your opinion a little bit on AI?
Yeah, I mean, AI is great, right? But AI is not something new. I don't want people to think that AI is new. I mean, we've talked to the customer support from all these major institutions and corporations. Like, how many times have you called your bank and then your call is being filtered by robot, right? And then that robot is going to try to characterize what your issue might be before you actually talk to a real person. And before you could talk to a real person, it might take you, 10, 15 minutes, right, to articulate. So AI has been around. AI has been with us for a little bit. It's just the tasks that now AI could do exceeds our previous expectations. I remember I shared this with you, like in the good old days when even right now, I mean, professional expertise is still very much respected, but not to the same extent as like 10, 20, 30 years ago when there was little technology help. It's like every time you go to the doctor and you want to find the most seasoned doctor in the field, because the doctor that you want to see perhaps has seen enough that they be able to tell, from hearing your symptoms, they be able to tell what affects you, what is the cause based on experiences, right? Mm-hmm. And right now, AI takes away that. AI could replicate that process without having that many years of experiences. So the expert opinion that's built on surveys, that's built on years of experiences could be replaced like with snaps of fingers, right?
And like we could argue that there's a good thing about that and that there's a bad thing about it. And that the good thing is, people who might not have been able to afford medical advice, now it's more readily available to them. The bad or the con, but people would argue the con is that experts are going to lose their jobs.
And you see, this is what baffles me the most, probably, because about 10, 20 years ago, when we first tasted the benefit of international trade, we outsourced a lot, right? Have you thought about like the X-rays that are being reviewed by doctors that are from a low-cost living area? Like, we've outsourced the work of those X-ray reviews to doctors in India, in the Philippines, for a long time, like 20, 30 years ago. And we at the time didn't worry about the X-ray reviewer here in the United States losing its job, right? And right now we seem to be worried about, what if everybody loses their job to AI? And that seems like a concern right now, right? But at the time when somebody else takes over, when someone else takes over someone else's job. We seem to be okay with it. And our argument at the time was, oh, you know what? Those who would lose jobs due to international trade, for example, could always retrain themselves, who always retool themselves. And now when we talk about AI, that's going to probably wipe out a massive amount of jobs. The positive argument disappears. Like, nobody talks about how we should retrain ourselves and focusing on, maybe cultivating ourselves with certain types of skills that are not replaceable. We lose the enthusiasm of trying to say, hey, guess what? Yes, AI could replace me with that kind of skill, and maybe I should be doing something more fun and more valuable. I personally am fine with AI. I think I'm an okay writer, right? And I am personally fine, and I love writing, by the way. And I'm personally fine with AI, being able to be my writing aid, because I know that my writing skills will still be prized, knowing that in order for AI to produce the level of writing that I'd be satisfied with, I gotta feed AI good enough writing to begin with. If I feed garbage to AI, it's gonna spell garbage back to me. So I think people misunderstand that, thinking that AI could be the one and all. I have a different type of perspective. I'm still pretty positive. And I'm not sure whether that answers the question, because I know a lot of people are worried about AI. And I think what people should worry about is not just AI, I think we should all have the positive mentality towards new things. Because before you get fearful, being fearful is not helping, I guess is what I'm saying.
True. Very true. Fear never helps.
Fear never helps. And on the flip side is, so does AI need monitoring? And people are, so I'm an economist. You see, people talk about how, the government should do something. The government should do something. Guess what? The government, if you want government to come in, most likely it'll take over, right? There's no like a fine line when you say, oh, the government should only do such and such and not interfere. No, if you want government to come in and regulate, it'll regulate everything.
Yeah, very true.
And that kind of confirms the people in the West, our mentality, growing up in a democratic society, we always have this, concern about, Big Brother's always watching, right? And that's a different kind of institutional perspective. If you were to ask people from, different parts of the world, they might share something very different. Like I once was being challenged and questioned by my friend who lives and works in mainland China, for example. And they talk about how, right, the benefits and value of them having this, all-in-one app called WeChat. It has all these, Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram function, or Twitter. I shouldn't say Twitter, it's X, or however it's called right now.
Yeah, it's X.
It's X, right? And then I refuse to call it X because I still see it as Twitter. Yeah. And in WeChat, there is payment where you need to connect your bank account with the payment system in WeChat, and you could hold some balance there. You could book tickets, you could pay for utilities, you could scan the QR code and pay merchants. And if you were to take taxi cab, most likely the driver will not take cash. So without WeChat payment, it's really difficult for you to move around. And the other day I was checking my WeChat account, and I was again being reminded that every penny that I spent via WeChat is being logged. It includes the time, the types of merchants that I visited, the types of services or products that I got, the geographical location, everything. Right? And if you were to ask people here, And people here might argue, oh, you know what? We have something similar, right? We have Venmo, we have Zelle, Apple Pay, and all that. Isn't that true that all of our purchases are being logged in the similarly systematic way? Well, but here you have a variety of choices. You don't necessarily have to be limited by using this one payment method, right? But in China, and by the way, I'm not trying to be political in any way. I'm just explaining the reality here and the institutional difference. The institutional difference is that there are certain people in some parts of the world that would promote the idea that we want the government to provide everything. We want, and we like it that way.
Of course.
Yeah. And right, as evidence from, WeChat, for example, the existence of WeChat. Yes, still WeChat is run by a private organization, but that private organization has a significant state influence, which something like that would never happen in the West.
Yeah, and it's complicated because sometimes you'll see laws, like, for example, I know one good thing that I personally think that China has done is that for children, they are like limited a certain amount of time on social media, like social media apps.
Right.
They shut off at night and then they open up again in the morning. I think that could have positive effects if we also put that in place in the US. But as you said, if we put that in place, like, what else is going to come out of that? Like, what else would the government want to control if we put that law in place? And that's like a whole other story.
Right. But full disclosure, I want my kids' video gaming time to be regulated by the government, and I shared that with them.
Of course, and I think we probably need to have a whole separate episode just devoted to social media. But going back to AI real quick,
yeah.
I agree with you in so many ways in that I think that AI can have so many positive effects, but also I feel like it is going to make us dumber. What do you think about that? Because like it's just going to make us a little bit dumber, right? Because even going back to like you said, a doctor, right? Right now, doctors have to learn all of these things because they are the one that is going to be with us. They have to consult with us. They have to give us treatments based on our consultation with them. That's one example. Another example is writing. Like, I grew up having to write essays completely by myself. The next generation won't have to do that. So will it make us more efficient? Yes. But will it make us more intelligent? I don't know. What do you think about that?
So I have a kind of a different opinion. I mean, dumber or smarter, right? I think, by the way, I'm super glad, and I kind of resonate to what you said, that we would probably be the last generation where we have gone the whole 9 yards of learning our trades without having effective help like AI. Which means that we had to, when we learned how to write, for example, we had to learn the ins and outs of writing. And now they have shortcuts, right? They have shortcuts. Going back to the doctor example, the dumb will become dumber. But the true experts, if you truly are interested in becoming an expert in the field, you are now required not only to cultivate your professional expertise, but also understand the importance of tooling. Because there are so many tools available to you, and then you need to know how to master those tools. And this is also connected to the previous example that I said about using AI to enhance my writing. I need to really make sure that I know how to create the most effective prompt so that AI doesn't spell back garbage, right, to enhance my writing. if I were to create a piece of writing that's already very good, and trust me when I said that, I actually one time, as an kind of an interesting exercise, I put in so much time in writing something, and I had a mission that I wanted to accomplish. I said I wanted to input the final product into AI and see and ask AI to proofread and see what improvements that I could get from AI for my writing, for that piece. And AI was like, the response that I got from AI was, oh, this is already very good. And there weren't that many. And perhaps it's because of the quality of my prompt, or maybe I kind of misdirected AI to just proofread and not enhance. And perhaps if I were to ask AI to enhance my writing based on the arguments in the piece that I put together, I will get different results. But from the proofreading perspective, AI cannot enhance anymore, right? And I think this confirmed what I said, that if you want to bring yourself to that level where AI could be an effective help, you can't be dumb. You have to still be, coming from a perspective that's like okay or above average for the AI to be truly helpful, if that makes sense, right? And then I wanted to wrap up what we just talked about how like the role the government plays, right? As people talk about, AI is dangerous, like we want government to, and this is not new. Because remember, I mean, when we started introducing products made from other countries, this is the same argument, and that's the whole point of why WTO, World Trade Organization, exists, is to ensure the health of international commerce. Right? You cannot. Everybody has to compete fairly. Everybody, right? And then you would always have people locally that talk about how the introduction of foreign-made products will take away jobs, will hurt their livelihood. Not just America. I mean, South Korea too. When South Korea was, signing the bilateral trade agreement with the United States, the farmers went on street to protest. Right? People are always looking for government intervention and protection, but is that a good thing? Right. And to answer your point, I mean, do we want and this is, by the way, this is very much connected to the technology industry, talking about games, video games, mobile games, or gaming console, or those publishers, the design of their game is intentionally to make people addictive. And now you're saying, oh, you know what, the government should do something so that people don't get addicted. Well, if getting people addicted is off the table, then how would that change the landscape of the gaming industry? So that's just the flip side. We talked about how technology is supposed to be helping people, and then but what about when we're being trapped? How do we get out?
I mean, we're being trapped in more than just video games. Like we were talking about social media. Social media is an endless scroll where people are just disappearing into the TikTok abyss. But like I said, that's a whole nother episode. Social media is a whole nother topic of its own, I think.
Right. So crash and build. Are we building or are we crashing? I don't know. Right?
I don't know.
Are we crashing more than we build, or are we building more than we crash?
Okay, I was talking to you before we started this episode, but I was recently listening to an episode of Trevor Noah's podcast, and he interviews Tristan Harris, and on the episode they talk about they're talking about AI. And there are some deeper levels to AI that I didn't really even know. But for example, right now, if you type in like most AI search engines, I guess if I'm using the right terms, they have filters on them, So for example, if you want to, I'm working on a website right now, where I need pictures of figure drawings of women because it's a plastic surgery site. If I type in figure drawings of women, that they're not going to show it to me because it goes over their agreement. Like they don't want people to be typing up like nudes and generating nude AI images.
Right.
But what Tristan Harris was saying, if you go onto like an open source AI engine, it doesn't have that many levels of protection. So, for example, if you wanted to, I don't know, build something that could really harm society, if you wanted to like build a gun or I don't know, it could give you that instructions because it doesn't have that many levels of protection yet.
Right. So that's human intervention, right? AI didn't know like what's going to harm humans yet, right? Because there's no filter, right? That's not AI's issue. AI doesn't care, right? So what do we want? What do we want? What do we want to promote, right? And to your point, there are a lot of things that I recently talk about, like I was talking to somebody that's affiliated with a religious organization. And so, for any religion, there are enough archives or observation points for the AI to work effectively to restore and maybe revive the important characters and figures.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? And would it be possible for AI to take into consideration all the published documents in a religion, in the archives, and come out with the modern Buddha or modern Jesus, right? Or a modern Muhammad, right? Is there a limitation in that? Or because AI doesn't care?
Right. AI doesn't care.
AI doesn't care. And we talk about crash and build. Are we crashing or are we building? What if we have an open source, and we do have an open source AI, and I'm pretty sure as we speak, there are probably people working on similar things, maybe not reviving religious characters, but reviving, loved ones that passed away.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in a sense, like the fact that we're leaving digital trails right now, and because we're recording this podcast episode with our intonation and the way that we speak, we're maybe in 3 to 5 years, Wei-Chung and India could be immortal, right? We could quote unquote live forever digitally, right? So are we crashing or are we building? I mean, in a sense, we're crashing, but in a sense, we're also building because I know for a fact that Wei-Chung is not going to live forever.
Mm-hmm.
Or is Wei-Chung living forever?
I mean, I don't know. I don't know in 20 years what we'll have.
Right. And now the business opportunities lie within, people want their loved ones to be revived. But the same technology could be applied to, I don't know, do you want to talk to Washington? George Washington? Do you want to talk to Lincoln? Or could Lincoln be potentially sharing his wisdom in guiding us through difficult times in politics? Or does the AI we use to revive quote unquote Lincoln or George Washington really represent what Lincoln and George Washington would say if they were still living? I don't know. Who controls that? Oof.
Ugh. And there's learning opportunities, like there's goods and there's bads, like I was saying. Like you could see a class talking to George Washington, like you said, helping students learn more, helping anyone learn more about, one of our founding fathers. Or you could see this as something like, this is obstructing life and death and immortality as we know it, I don't
Right.
know.
And then there will be people that come along and say, no, the government needs to regulate it. Oh, really? Where do we draw the line then?
Right. And even if the government does regulate it, aren't people just going to get past it?
Yeah, right. I don't want people to think that we're overly emphasizing AI. We're basically talking about all possible technologies, and AI happens to be the one that people nowadays are most interested in. But the ramifications of innovation are limitless, are really everywhere.
Truly.
So as we think about how we crash and build with technology, I guess the important takeaway of our conversation is, what are we doing? Do we have enough humanistic thought? Because at the end of the day, if what we're doing doesn't benefit us human beings, how do we weigh pros and cons? Because the economic incentive system that we set in the system doesn't encourage entrepreneurs to think more, because they are racing against time. Everybody that I talk to in Silicon Valley that has some sort of ideas that they want to develop, they always are worried about, oh, if I don't do it today, somebody else is going to do it. Which means that nobody has the time or luxury of time to think about the ramifications of what they're doing. And the only way to judge the success of any entrepreneur is whether or not they could capitalize it, they could monetize it, they have the economic rewards, which generally doesn't necessarily line up with, maybe not, saying moral principles would be too big of an accusation, but generally their economic reward is not line up with probably the benefit of the greater good.
And I mean, I know, like, going back to this episode I was just talking about, Tristan Harris did become, he was working on Google. He was helping with a bunch of engineering that contributed to social media, and went into play at Meta in general. And then he was part of the documentary The Social Dilemma, and then became I think human experience designer or something at Google. So he invented a position which he thought that it was necessary to have at Google, at a company that contributes to society so much at large, because they weren't really taking consideration into how their inventions were actually affecting our lives as we know it. They were just building and building and building, and kind of chasing profit. And he was somebody who kind of said, hey, wait, like, we're not really seriously considering the implications of these things that we are building, and maybe we need to consider those implications a little bit more.
But yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think especially people like that, they are sitting in a place where they have seen it, right? So they've witnessed the development, the evolution of, the technology that invented, how it's creating an impact, positive or negative or both, to the society. And so they're now at a stage where they're reviewing, looking back what we have really done, right? I don't think that majority of people whether in technology industry or business in general, have the capacity to do that. And I know that I'm painting a pretty dark picture, right? And I'm basically saying in a very polite way that nobody cares. Which is, I think there's right there's some truth to it. There's some truth to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So take a look at what we're doing here right now. I mean, we're convinced that what we're providing to the world is going to help you obtain a better life, right? We're very convinced. As a matter of fact, every counterpart or competition that we have come across, they are equally convinced that what they're doing is benefiting the society. And we spend less time trying to tell our audience, no, there's caveat, right? We don't spend much time talking about that. And this is not to say that we're all evil, but we kind of have to be biased. We have to be convinced that we're doing something good. And again, I'm not painting an evil picture. Most likely we are. Most likely we are. And sometimes there is a side effect, which is the ramification that I talked about. And the side effect of our product and service interacting with other products and services in the field, that could potentially create a negative impact. That is out of our control. And we're not in a place to think that far, because that will take away all possibilities of us creating something productive for people to use it right away.
You know what? I'm gonna try to paint a rosy picture, since you were painting such a dark one, a bleak one. I going back to how I was saying that we're becoming dumber. I seriously think that we might become dumber, right? But what really matters is how much, as a society, we want to preserve the pieces of life that we think are important. So just because AI is is helping us write, does that mean that there's not going to be poets still out there that write their own things? It might even become more popular, who knows? Just because, I'm using AI to find images for websites doesn't mean that there aren't still going to be artists. There might be more artists, there might be people who dive into art more deeply because they see how motorized it is now, right? And that could be with everything. There's social media, but that doesn't mean that people aren't going to still go out of their way to spend time in person, to throw parties, to get together. That's something that I would argue. I think that going into the future, as a society, we'll probably try to preserve what we think is best and that we want to hold on to still.
And it is a collective effort too.
Yes.
Right. And I love what Dave Chappelle said when he accepted the Mark Twain's prize back in, I want to say 2021. He's a stand-up comic that I respect. And obviously sometimes his opinions are controversial. And I know people might have like different thoughts about his opinions. But when he accepted that prize, he thanked his mother, who was in attendance. And he said that his mother noticed that he had this special ability when he was growing up, when he was a little kid. And his mother told him that, in Africa, every village has a position called griot. So a griot is the kind of like the senior person in the village that knows everything, and that has pretty much kept everybody's stories. And if the villager has any issue, they would consult the griot, and the griot will tell the person, what happened in the past, and maybe, what happened in the past could be used as a reference. And the griot dies. It's like the library has been burned down. And his mother told him that, I want you to be a griot. you know, or maybe he told his mother that I want to be a grilt, the person that tells stories. And to your point, it's the collective memories that symbolize human civilization, right? It's the reason why we know why we need to celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas, and such, right? And I think it's a big undertaking, or I think it's a little bit too much to ask for people that are, you know, working at the front line, developing all these new technology, to always bear in mind that what they need to do, you know, they have to have a very clear idea as to what they're doing, what is the potential impact of what they're doing for our future. Because nobody's a clairvoyant. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and we don't know what our work product, how our work product is going to interact with the society or other services and products provided by others. And some of them might have, like, you know, negative or even positive implications. And which is why I think we're constantly crashing and building. And it is okay if we're building something that causes effects that we didn't intend to. You know why? Because we could crash it again and rebuild. And as a person that has been in the technology industry for long, I have faith in not only the entrepreneurs that I work with and the entrepreneurs that I have seen, but I have also faith in the humanity. I hope that's a very good wrap up. I think, you know, crash and build. This is still, I believe in this. We may not need to just focus on building. Sometimes we need to talk about crashes.
And as much as it's up to the builders, as much as it's up to Sam Altman, it's also up to us. You know, we also have a lot of power as a collective humanity, and you know, as technology increases overall, it's up to us as the consumers to also decide how we want to use it and how much we want to use it.
Yeah. We really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and you know, follow us along. We will keep crashing and building. I'll see you next time.
Crash and Build is a Kaydan production from Kaydan Mobile. It is hosted by Wei-Chung and co-hosted and produced by India Tucker. To learn more about Kaydan and its intelligent software solutions, visit kaydanmobile.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Crash and Build.